What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Christians of all ages? I am your host, Tyler Fowler, and you are listening to the Complete Sinner's Guide. We have a panel of guests with us tonight. This is kind of like a mini roundtable, Josh. It's nice to get a couple people back on. We've been like a one-on-one. Don't get me wrong, I love one-on-one interviews, but I love having a big group of people. And we've got two brothers joining us tonight, fellow metalheads like Josh and I are, Brad Vasquez and Chic Estose. Josh, what is going on, brother, man? So we did an episode on Friday about the importance of prayer and scripture, and now we're doing a show about Christian metal. Is there a place in Christianity for heavy metal music? Brother, what do you think?
Man. Well, that is quite a segue. First of all, thank you, Brad and Chick, for coming on here and talking with us about this. As I was praying beforehand, I was thanking God about having common ground to be passionate about. I always think that that's a really cool thing. I like to be able to connect with you guys. So this is actually really cool for me. So thank you for this. In terms of metal, I would say that that's kind of, it's such a vague thing that I don't want to necessarily just say like metal, but like, let's say like the heavier style of music, right? That I think that's vague enough to kind of encompass what I would mean. So heavier style music is kind of what we mean by metal. Metal is something that kind of developed out of a hodgepodge of different influences. And so if we're talking about metal, we're not necessarily just talking about the sound on the guitar or really fast drums or lots of cymbal play. That's not necessarily what metal is. And so it's kind of, I like working past just the generic stereotype. I think that metal as a genre is more like a tool than it is like anything else. I think of music because I think a lot of people have a strange idea about music in general, especially the music in the church, where they think that the music has to be a specific type of way in order to carry the glory or whatever you want to describe that process as. When I think it's more actually appropriate and reverent to think about the music as more like something like a conveyor belt that's bringing something to other people. It's just ascending. It's a straw. You know what I mean? Like the straw that gives your drink to your mouth. Like it's just a tool to deliver something. That's all it is, right? And so I think there are parts of reality that that deserve the presence of a really heavy delivery, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. There are circumstances we've been talking about practical Christianity, and within that, there is so many different circumstances that Christians find themselves in, right? And we need these outlets, we need these mediums, we need these tools, as you said, Josh, to speak to all different kinds of people. Christianity is a very broad brush, right? And there are multiple people, with different beliefs, different things, just different aspects about them that I believe wholeheartedly. And I'm testifying about this from my perspective, from my experience with Christian metal. It's helped me. The lyrics, it's an outlet. It's something that I can go do, whether I'm angry, whether I'm happy, whether I'm, having a whole bunch of different kinds of emotions, and I really don't know what to do with them. I can just put on some Fit for a King and just scream. And guess what? I'm worshiping God doing that because of the lyrics that they have, because of all of these different, again, aspects of music, what music is and what it does to individuals, right? It speaks volumes. Music speaks volumes. And I love music. I've always had a passion for music. That's why I play bass. Josh, all of our guests here tonight, Brad, Chick, Josh, right? We are all musicians. And so what's great about it is we all love metal. And so I wanted to bring these guys on, Brad, Chick, to make an affirmative case for Christian metal. I've seen Chick, I've seen some of your TikToks, man, and it just seems like some of the negative comments you get in particular about this type of music, this genre, it seems like a lot of people, and I say this humbly, extremely humbly, but it seems like the majority of people that give you negative comments don't even listen to the music. They're assuming because it's different, because it's something that they're not accustomed to, they automatically downplay it or even demonize it, right? And so I brought Chick on to talk about this. Let's get a grasp of what is happening, and then, in my opinion, let us learn to embrace it, because guess what? There are a lot, again, I'll say it again, and then I'll bring Brad on, but Christianity is a broad brush. And I'm telling you, Jesus did not hang out with one type of person. He hung out with sinners. So, and those come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. So, without further ado, Brad, we've had you on CSG and Pora one time. We debated. We were sitting across the table from each other. This time, I love it. We're on the same side of the table talking about something we're both extremely passionate about, brother, and we can agree on it. And so, thank you for joining us, Brad. I'm super happy to have you back. But for those who don't know you, introduce yourself. Tell people about yourself, what you're about, and when did you first become accustomed and really into metal, Christian metal?
Amen, brother. So yeah, for those who don't know me, I am Brad. I am one half of the two parts that make up the Alternate Media hosts. I won't say the whole staff. We've added other staff members recently, but
Congrats.
Yeah, we're in a process of a little bit of growth. So it's the ministry is being blessed. It's awesome. And yeah, this is a subject that I'm very passionate about because I have had so many heated conversations about this subject in particular, where this type of music fits in the life of a believer. And I was funny. Me and Josh were just talking about it before we went live. Um, for me, I started playing guitar at like 12 years old.
Mhm.
And for the first 3 years or so, um, it didn't develop beyond the average, 4 chord progression of your average praise music, right? Especially I grew up in an independent fundamental Baptist home. So that's the kind of music that I was allowed to play.
Mm.
Uh, and it wasn't until I went to in my town, all of the local youth groups for a little while would work together at the end of summer to throw like a back to school bash for all of the local youth groups. And there are a few bands that each youth group had. Like it wasn't like the youth band, but it was a band built up from kids who were in the youth groups. Some of them you guys may know.
Mm.
One of them in particular you may know because they played at Warped Tour like once or twice. Um, and I want to say it was Fear of Falling. Um, yeah,
Sounds
that would
familiar.
have been years ago. I mean, you're talking before 2K10.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, they made it to Warped Tour. They weren't really metal. I wouldn't call them metal, but they somehow fit the Warped Tour bill. But it's particularly a youth band for one of the local churches. Their name was Sycamore Sighting. And they had just this amazing sound. Their guitar player was just nasty. And the first time I saw them, it was just like, I want to play this kind of music.
Uh-huh.
This is what I want to do. And so yeah, from that point, I mean, I got into, As I Lay Dying, Haste the Day, a lot of those like old school, they're not as popular now, but like for me, that's still my bread and butter.
Yeah.
But yeah, like from that point forward, I just like jumped into metal head first.
Right on, right on. Haste the Day was the first Christian metal band that I had ever heard. So going back, we was actually in a charismatic Pentecostal church, River of Life, and I was going to youth group there, and it was something like Whose Line? I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Whose Line Is It Anyway? The show with Drew Carey. Yeah. Colin Mockery, Ryan Stiles, all those guys. But we were doing like a little skit like that, and we got like we would get rewarded. We'd get points if we, did really good or whatever. Well, I'll never forget the guy. The youth pastor's name was Ozzy, and he was a radio host at 89.1. 89.1 The Bash. And it's crazy. It's a little radio station out of Evansville. I think it's a college campus. They've changed so much. I don't even know if they're still on the air, to be honest. But it used to be your alternate, rock, basically, or alternative rock. And he would host every Sunday night the Christian, I think he called it like the Christian Power Hour or something, where he would play modern rock, Christian. And he gave me a Haste the Day album. It was one of their first or second album. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I put it on, and the first thing, I'll never forget it. The first thing I thought was, what in the world are these guys saying, man? And so after I looked up the lyrics, though, I was like, you know what? This is totally not what I thought it was going to be, right? I was all nervous going to listen to it. Thought my dad was going to walk in and be like, what are you listening to? That devil music, da-da-da. And I read the lyrics, bro, and I'm not kidding. Like, I fell in love with it at that moment. Like, that's how it was for me. And then, you get into, just all different types of bands. My two favorites now, Josh has turned me on to For Today. Love For Today, and then Fit for a King. Two of my favorite. I'd love to see Fit for a King. I tried to reach out to Fit for a King to see if they would come on to the podcast, just have like a little one-on-one back and forth about this subject, man. But they haven't responded.
I tried to connect with Maddie from
Maddie Montgomery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's like not free for speaking engagements anymore. He's pastoring a church,
right?
Like he's doing a conference soon at the Altar conference with what's his name, Derek Carr from the Raiders, I think, right?
Okay.
They're doing. I went to the first one that they did. Oh, it's incredible. But they're doing another one now because COVID's over or whatever. And he's just like, he's not, you know what I mean? He's doing too much. But
blowing up, man. He's absolutely. He's got that book out. What's the name of the book?
He's got a couple of books. He's got Scary God and Beautiful Things in Ugly Places.
That one, Beautiful Things in Ugly Places. Totally.
That is incredible. Anybody who wants to know the impact of Christian metal, when somebody is like, yeah, this isn't about a Jesus bandwagon. I'm not getting off it when we're done here. He's like a pastor of a church now. Right. That guy was like wholesale in it for Jesus as much as he could be, Amen. As much as he could be pure about it. Like, he'd be honest about the fact that it's like, yeah, I also wanted to be, seen. I wanted the microphone. It's like this excitement, whatever. It's like,
right.
But you can have that at any job. There are certain people that like, I have a really cool job and I get excited about my job. I love doing my job, but I just get to bring Jesus to work with me, right. And like that's impactful. Like, what am I supposed to do? Do something God didn't design me for, or use the thing that God designed me for as my evangelism tool? Like, exactly. Is that not the most intuitive thing for an evangelist? And so it's like,
exactly.
This guy's the vocalist for a metal band, and he's a great evangelist. And so he would use his job and his tools to do God's work. And he wrote a book about it called Beautiful Things in Ugly Places, and you should look it up. It's really incredible.
It reminds me of, for those who know, Chris Randall from Crazy God Story on TikTok. He has a similar book about the different experiences that he's had living by faith. I mean, this man, for those who don't know Chris, I highly, highly recommend you follow him, because the dude has had so many, I would call them close encounters of the third kind with God, right? Because this dude's faith is amazing. He quit his job, completely quit his job, to run a auto mechanic shop, a free auto mechanic shop. And he would go around fixing cars for people for free. And God has blessed him enormously with the gift of faith to do that, man. I don't know if I could just leave my job, making $50,000 a year, to go do something for free and hoping, for the best. So all the love in the world to Chris, but without further ado, Chic Estose, brother, it is your first time on CSG. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to have you and Brad on to talk about this subject tonight. But before we get into it, before we dive in deep, man, give the folks, who are you, brother? What are you about? And when did you first start getting into the Christian metal scene?
Yeah. So firstly, thank you so much for reaching out to me, Tyler. And as I told you guys, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. So I'm so stoked to have this conversation. I can talk about this stuff every day, all day. Oh my goodness. So the first heavy band I ever heard, and if anyone knows what this radio station is, because they're decently popular, I grew up listening to Radio U because I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and
Okay.
they have lots of different extensions all over the country. So some people know who they are, but yeah, I grew up listening to Radio U, and the first songs I heard on, because they're like an alternative like radio type Christian radio station. So like they don't play worship, they don't play CCM. So I listened to them, and the first band I ever listened to on their radio network when I was like in middle school was, this isn't heavy at all, but I have to give them a mention because they're goats. Is Fire and Frenzy, the ska band. Yeah, right.
Real quick, Chick. For those who don't know, what is ska?
Ska is a mix between punk rock, reggae, and
Yes.
with horns added to it.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like high school band nerd punk.
Right.
I've heard a description once that said ska is what plays in an 11-year-old boy's head when he gets extra mozzarella sticks.
I love it so much. Oh my goodness.
I think that's the most 90s thing I've ever heard in my life.
Has to be.
But yeah, the first time I ever heard on Radio U, and it's my first experience other than like DC Talk in the 90s when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But the first
Bro.
Jesus freak.
freak. Yeah. The first experience I had with any kind of Christian alternative music was Five Iron Frenzy on Radio U, and I was like, oh, this slaps. And then I started listening to more Radio U, and then a couple years after that, when I was in middle school, they played a song called Dictatorship vs. Democracy by Staple, which Staple's awesome metal band from Ohio. And I was like, stuff started just like feeling on the inside, and I was like, oh my goodness, I really connect with this. And then I had to listen to more and more and more. And through Radio U, I owe Radio U a lot because of they got me into this stuff. I got into a bunch of bands because of them. But yeah, I just got into more and more and more. And this was like early 2000s, so I'm like getting into them, Under Oath, Haste a Day, As I Lay Dying, Demon Hunter, like all those bands because of Radio U. And then it just kept on growing and growing, and rest is rock and roll history. So yeah.
Right on, brother. Right on. So I want to ask you guys something real quick, because we've mentioned them now a couple times. And so As I Lay Dying, right? We know that, oh man, I'm forgetting now. What's the lead singer's name?
Tim Lambesis.
Tim
Yeah.
Lambesis. So there was a while back, there was kind of a dark spot on the Christian metal scene for a little bit. Tim was, I don't know the details, but he was accused of hiring a hitman to kill his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And that, whenever I first heard about it, because I loved As I Lay Dying, go look up their lyrics. I mean, this was God honoring music, right? And then to see and to hear about that. Now, he went to court. I know he went to prison. He's out now, correct?
And reformed the band.
And reformed a band. So it's not As I Lay Dying anymore, though, is it?
Oh, it is.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And so let me ask you guys this. Whenever, and I think, I know the answer already, right? But I want to get everybody's input on it. And we'll start with Brad. But whenever that happens, right? Whenever anyone, and this could happen with any role model, with any person that, is looked up to. Whenever something like this happens, is it an actual, the word's escaping me, but it's not fair, in my opinion, to, if one person screws up, right, even if it's a big screw up, to make that, well, that's all Christian metal represents, and that's
Right.
that's it, right? And so, Brad,
Guilty
you
by
kind of hear where,
association.
yes, guilty by association. That's what I was thinking of. So
Well, it's
let me
also
get
a
y'all's thoughts.
confirmation bias. You know, there's something like a
Okay.
confirmation bias going on where it's like, this is
Yeah.
this is proof of the darkness that we've been suspecting of you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, I mean, we could literally do that about anything. I mean, Steve Fee, I could do it about Steve Fee. We could do it about Michael W. Smith. I mean, how many of the standard 4-chord progression, mind-numbing, transy praise bands, how many of these iconic stars have slept with backup vocalists? Right, and had an affair on their wife? Like, if we really want to play that game, I feel like I actually have more evidence in the Christian contemporary world than you have in the Christian metal world, if we're really going to be honest. But I still wouldn't do that, because everybody is an individual. Everybody has to own their own sin individually, and so the actions of Tim Lambesis don't even reflect on the whole band, right? Much less the whole genre. Which the band actually they kind of stuck around, and they did a few things not under the name As I Lay Dying. I believe it was called Woven War for a little while. And yeah, and I still listen to them because I love them. They were still awesome.
Sure.
But I would say it was more an emotional blow, just because Tim Lambesis was somebody that I looked up to, and so it was hard. But I'm actually loving the comeback, because as I understand, the album that they released just prior to that happening, and you can even see it in some of the lyrics if you take the time to stop and look at them, took a darker turn. And he was kind of flirting with deconstruction and atheism at that point. And you can really see that brought out in the lyrics. But now, as they're coming back, it's going Christian again. Like he has been reborn in a new way. And like, I'm so stoked about that.
Yeah. And see, that's, I think that, yes, what he was accused of doing is horrible, right? But we should, instead of being sorrowful about something that happened in the past, we should be thanking and praising God that he is going from atheist, that sounds like deconstructionist, maybe dropping back hints of Christianity and going back that route. And so, I got to dig more into that. I haven't. I just thought of it as we were kind of talking about this. But Chick, let me get your what's your thoughts on it? Same. Do you agree with Brad or?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% you. The story of Tim from As Late Dying reminds me of the first chapter of First Timothy when Paul talks about how he was, a violent man and a persecutor. And I mean, God used Paul to establish his church. So like, if what Paul did to Christians, and Tim didn't even like successfully murder his wife. If Paul successfully persecuted and killed tons of Christians, and so like, if God can do what we did with Paul and showed the grace he showed through Paul, then what are we doing something different with Tim from As Lay Dying? So that's pretty much my take on it. Is same exact thing in First Timothy chapter 1. So yeah,
sure,
man.
Absolutely. Josh, what's your thoughts on it? And then I've got something I want to add as well. But go ahead, Bub.
Honestly, I don't hate me. I'm not a heretic for this, but I didn't really listen to
heretic.
That much,
oh man,
they were a little bit, and here's the thing: is this is part of what I was talking about with Brad beforehand, which really became instrumental for me learning how to play the drums. Right, was that I'm quick with fractions, and so things that are divided too evenly bore me quickly. And so I like polyrhythmic values. I don't like the kind of ADHD polyrhythms that some bands do where they can't play the same measure twice ever. That, like, you don't have to do that. But you know, if you're playing the same thing and you just get this kind of digga 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 through the whole thing, like that is kind of droning to me. And so bands that sounded like that, one of the first or second times that I listened to them, usually I'd be like, meh, you know. And a
You
couple
were
of
an
the
August
songs that
Burns
I
Red
listened to,
fan.
I was very much, but I also liked Under Oath a lot.
Mariana's
That was
Trench.
one of the bands that I grew up really loving. Like their old stuff, like with Dallas Taylor was still the vocalist, and it was like
Yeah.
overtly Christian, you know.
Mm.
That really like that rattled my cage a lot because at the time I was dating this girl, it was my first girlfriend, and she was like Wiccan, you know, like, but I was still going to church and everything, and like I was, you know, I was like doing this thing, like it's a weird kind of like this like performative contradiction in the mind of a teenager, and then all of a sudden this like, whoa, like that's the kind of music that I like, but I don't have to feel weird about listening to it. Really? And then like
Yep.
really going into it and thinking like, who wrote this? This is like a prayer journal.
Right.
I think one thing worth noting too, I think that this actually speaks to how God works. And you'll all know exactly what time period I'm talking about it as soon as I say this. But there was a little while there where the top echelon of metal bands were all Christian bands. Like you look at the list
yeah.
of top fives and top tens, all of them were Christian bands.
Yeah. Yeah. Like 2003 to 2006, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
like I like to refer to the late 2000s as like the golden era of Christian metalcore. For
Yeah.
sure.
And it's cool because there was this development too, where like, you know, and that's one of the things that I really appreciated about Under Oath when they released the album with Spencer Chamberlain on it, who has since been shockingly not Christian lately. And I that bothered me a lot, but it was after a point where I'd started to develop a taste for, let's say, more instrumental styles of metal. And so metal like remained there, but you know, Christian metal as a kind of like template or like this subculture within a certain kind of genre of metal, because metal's not like like I told you, like I was saying before, it's like so vague. There's a different metalheads will tell you that there's 1,000 different kinds of metal. You know what I mean?
Yes,
and it's
Absolutely.
like it what I think happens is people get the sound of something and then they instantly make a like partially rational judgment, where it's kind of like, and this is something that Tyler and I have talked about a lot of times before. There are things that I know about that I'm comfortable with. They're my known territory, right? And the things that land outside that can be a place that where like it promises me something I have never encountered before, but it also can kill me. And so I'm not a gambling person, so I'm usually tending to be on the safer side of things, right? So using that side of me, I can kind of steelman the idea that, well, this sounds like, therefore caution, right? And so I don't want to seem like this is just like an ignorance of any other kind of way of thinking just because we all like the same thing. Metal's not the only thing that I listen to, right? And as a musician, I find it tasteful to notice, like I said in the beginning, all of the things that influenced metal and the way that metal ended up forming itself among the Christian community between, let's say, 2000 to 2010, and the kind of things that were able to come out. And then the advent of YouTube becoming this like place for music to exist in this space where we like people were trading freely ideas in a way that had never happened before. And it's really interesting to see that the kind of, let's say, leaderless sub community that happens inside the internet space with the advent of things like YouTube and Spotify, be able to trade music and ideas, the idea of Dropbox, things like that. Say again.
MySpace was the same exact way back in the day. So
yeah, exactly.
MySpace.
Yeah, for real. MySpace and Zanga and all like these websites that, you know, like they used to be the biggest thing in the world to me when I'm a teenager, but it's like you don't realize what this technology is doing, what kind of reach it has, and the ability to create something like a space to exist in with one another, that we could
Right.
participate in something together, right? And then being a part of, let's say, the Christian community whose interest is pointed toward that kind of thing, you notice because of the bands that you're interested in, and let's say you go to a show and you watch them, you see the bands that open for them and you go, whoa, okay, what's that? And then
Yep.
you find out, and then you find all these people that are like-minded in the crowd with you. And it's like, what's the common thread? It's not just the music. It's not just the music. It's not just the black clothes. What is it? It's like, we have an existential outrage toward the evil in the world, and we can't help but just look it in the face. And what kind of music reflects that best? Confrontation, intensity, suspense.
Right.
Like, what is it that's going to match tone with that? And it's like, that guy up there screaming. Like, what a kind of delivery would you have for the kind of righteous indignation that you see in the world when you notice that, billions of dollars goes into the trafficking of children and women, even just in our own country, and it's
Or
like,
today brought that up.
you can't, yeah, exactly. You can't look that in the face. Like, what are you just going to pretend it away? Let's start a fundraiser. Like, no, how about you just like let everybody know that this is unacceptable and we need to stop being quiet.
Right. Like Silent Planet did with the opioid addiction, right? You sent me a video, Josh, on the opioid crisis, and it was a music video by one of your favorite bands, I believe, Silent Planet, from C.S. Lewis, the Space Trilogy, right? And so that's where they got their name from, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And so, with that, there's, going back and listening, kind of, just hearing you talk, man, I agree 100%. With the advent of the internet, there are so many good things that come with that. We're all in 4 different states, right? And we can sit here and have a conversation about this. But with that, there is so much negativity that comes along with it. And just going back to the Tim Lambesis thing, talking about steel man arguments and this thing. Here's the thing. Here's what I tell people all the time. Your relationship, for those who are married, your relationship with Jesus is like your relationship with your wife. You should not let anyone, and I mean anyone, ruin your relationship with your wife. It's not your wife's fault that this person went out and did something, whatever, right? Just because one person does something doesn't mean that that's how that's how all in that community, that's how all in that culture act. We all have our shortcomings. I guarantee you, Josh, Chick, Brad, myself, we have all had our shortcomings. And if we were all honest with you, you would probably think very, very small of us. I know me, right? For sure. And so here's the thing. First of all, we can't judge one person's actions and say the whole community is like that. Because again, Jesus is who we're in a relationship with, and Jesus is the one who set the standard. Not Tim Lambesis, not Brad Vasquez, not Chic Estose, not Josh Davidson, not Tyler Fowler. Jesus did. And so we should be striving to be like him, not like us, right? And so with that, Chick, I want to go to you, and let's talk about steel man arguments. Let's talk about because I've seen you, man, you've confronted this. So what are some of the more common objections you have heard about metal and Christian metal? And what are your answers to them, brother?
Okay, so to be honest, I didn't get a lot of pushback for most of my life with the people in like my actual real life that I know about.
Ain't it funny how that works? I don't mean to interrupt, but ain't it funny? Like the people you're closest with, it's fine, but someone who don't know you that's thousands of miles away. Oh,
but yeah,
I'm concerned about you.
Yeah,
there you are. You didn't even know me, but yeah, I didn't start getting it pushback on stuff until social networking sites started getting more popular, and then but I'm 31 now, so by this time now, listening to heavy music for almost 20 years now, I can defend it, and like people, it doesn't bother me that people have such a big problem. So, but here are some of the biggest things I see and have seen. The biggest one I see a lot of times is kind of the negative connotation, the negative presuppositions of heavy music for what either it came from or a lot of the influences, so people will see like Marilyn Manson making heavy music and be like, oh, it must be all of that, right? Or a lot of the stuff in the 80s and even till now, a lot of the stuff is satanic. So like, don't quote me on this, but like, what's the Lorna Shore? Are they satanic? Do we know if Lorna Shore is?
I don't know actually.
Okay, but there's a lot of super satanic deathcore out there.
I will say this
Right, yeah.
just real quick. One of the most satanic bands I've ever heard of was Gargaroth.
Okay,
if you're familiar with Gargaroth, I think that's how you pronounce them. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. Or they're not satanic, but they have a lot of really bad imagery. But like Slipknot, who is awesome, everyone loves Slipknot, but they have some really bad. Over the years, have had some really bad imagery, and so people, especially Christians, will see a bunch of that stuff and be like, "Oh, so this must be everything that sounds like this, right?" And then once they get that thought, it's like, "Oh yeah, write it off immediately." So yeah.
You mentioned Slipknot, and so yeah, they've got a lot of negative imagery, but some of that comes from personal experience with Christians, and that we really can't lose sight of that, because that puts an onus on us for how we present to the rest of the world. And they do their research, so a lot of the subject matter that they talk about is actually pretty well researched. As far as certain of the themes that they use, or even their lyrics, and A7X is another one, right?
Yep.
Avenged Sevenfold, chapter 4. Like, nobody ever stops to consider that that's about chapter 4 of Genesis. That's the story of Cain and Abel, and it's not even really that it's given a negative light. They're not. It's like an alternate telling of the story,
right?
Really. But it's dark, though. It takes on a darker light. But it's like these guys actually they know the Bible better than like the average lay Christian does.
Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, that's the biggest one I see all the time. They just a lot of presuppositions about all these other bands. They have some very sketchy stuff that they do and whatever, and then that must mean everything else is like that. Some of the other stuff I see is just straight up preference, right? So like they'll like this one lady who's been commenting on my TikToks a lot, which be like, "Oh, that sounds so demonic. It must be bad." Like,
how does something sound
okay?
demonic?
Well, that's my. Where in the Bible does it say how demons sound like?
Well, can I
They're
say
loud.
something again, just to kind of like bring out, let's say, the potential for making that a real thought, like a real argument thought,
right.
Real. Like if you were to take that and kind of thoughtfully make it into something like, this is why, right? And explain yourself. Let's say if somebody says this sounds demonic, right? And then you ask the question, Tyler, what? How do you know what a demon sounds like? Like, wait a minute, right? So then thinking about it, when you say demonic, these are associative words. She doesn't actually mean a demon, right? She doesn't expect that there's on this recording there's a demon. Maybe she does, I don't know, but yeah. I'm assuming that this is a reasonable person making a reasonable statement. So let's say they'd said that because it sounds monstrous, that it must be monstrous, and then make only a negative association with monstrousness, right? And then let's say if metal sounds monstrous, and so do the people that like do their vocals over it, right? And then to look at, let's say, a 5-second snapshot of something like a metal show from above and be like, look, even the people listening can't help but be violent.
Right. And I remember when I was in youth group, when I was in high school, I went to a friend's youth group, and one of the youth leaders was preaching a sermon, and a lot of me and my friends that were at this thing were very, very into the heavy music, and he like went up and just straight up said, y'all should stop moshing because moshing is the spirit of suicide or something like that. And we were like, what? But I can understand where that comes from, right? And I can understand that you see all the violent stuff happening. And I would say the moshing that goes on at hardcore shows and any other kind of moshing at shows is very very consensual, if that's a good way to put it. Everyone knows it's going to happen when they get
Usually, yeah.
Usually, sometimes I've been to a lot of shows where there are dudes who want to go to a show and they have doing, and then they get into fights because they don't know. Oh, I might bumped into by someone in a mosh pit, and they start fights because they're.
And then there's always that dude who's had too many monsters, who's just
right.
Here's the hint, ladies and gentlemen. If you are at a metal show and you see a circle start forming and you don't want to get hit, get
Move.
out.
Right.
Get out.
Yeah.
Or if you go to a show and you find yourself at the edge of the pit, put your hand out like in a fist.
Yep.
And most of the time, people will feel it and like, I gotta move away.
Yep.
But so I can understand you seeing, and you're not knowing. You don't. These people don't go to these shows. They don't know. Well, that's why everyone's there to have fun. I would compare it to, well, if you think just because this is violent that it's bad, then you should also think that we shouldn't play football anymore. You should also think we should play rugby anymore.
UFC. What about UFC?
Yes.
Right. So, I'm from Columbus. Big Ohio State football fan. I'm sorry if anyone listening is a Michigan fan or anything like that. It's very religious. Very religious. Like not in a literal sense, like figuratively. Right. Ohio State football is a religion here in Columbus. So like if you think that you shouldn't listen to metal because we mosh at shows, because it's violent, then you can't watch Ohio State football anymore. Because you know what? Also violent. So
you know, it's so subjective to describe things this way, right? To ascribe the negative connotation to it, like saying that it sounds demonic, or talking about the violent nature of what of what moshing looks like and everything. Because going back again to like the alternative examples that we could give for the opposite side. I mean, what does being slain in the spirit or any number of other practices that people would describe as being overtaken by the Holy Spirit, right? Other people would define that as demonic looking, or as violent looking, or like this is subjective.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, to be fair, I was making kind of like a case based on that associative kind of thinking, right? And to think more rationally about what things that are present that could be negatively associated, right? And Chick, you did a great job of narrowing it down to something like, no, that's not really good enough to define what's bad, because this also, right? It's a philosophical defeater.
Yeah.
It's like you're saying it's not. It's like all I need is one example, one example that you find acceptable that you wouldn't apply the same case. Tell me why it's different, right? So let's say football is, as you said, consensual, but it's also competitive. It's an enterprise. It's a game. The injuries are not sought out. There's many things that we do to avoid the injuries that come to that.
Yeah.
So it's like knowingly putting yourself in danger perhaps is another negative thing, but it's like, imagine again, the thing that I was talking about when I said the common thread for everyone present, right? Not just the loud music, not just the black clothes or whatever, not just the weird, scratchy, thorn-looking writing on everybody's T-shirt, right?
That you can't read at all.
Yeah, you can't read. Like the less you can read, the more it looks like a weird running,
read it either, so
vine of some sort. Like there's loads of things that are like these common threads, but it's like, no, personally, what's the thing that ties all of this together? It's like outrage against sin, really. Even at the darker metal shows that aren't Christian bands, it's odd that they're all unified around their outrage for the darkness that they're seeking to embody in irony. That's what they're trying to be, living versions of irony. It's like, what is Satanism? It's like a big metaphysical middle finger is all it is. It's like, what are they doing and why are they doing it? And the answer is, what they're doing is trying to make an inverted, ugly picture of what it is that they think Christianity is, right? And it's like, what is it that these bands are doing? It's like they're taking the world that outrages them and they're flipping it upside down. They're saying, now you look at me, right? And the fans who are in the crowd are often doing the same thing with their lifestyles and their choice of dress. They're saying, no, you look at me. This is unacceptable.
Mhm.
This world, you, me, this whole thing, it's unacceptable. And this is my protest, my silence, my embodying whatever darkness I see that's out there, so that I can make my outrage known, right? And then it's like the Christian community latches onto this potential and says, wait a minute, have you not heard there's an answer? They're like, what are you talking about? I don't go to church. It's like, well, then we'll come to you.
Yes.
Yeah, man, for sure.
It's worth doing.
And I love that characterization, because I 100% agree. I think there's another aspect to it too, that at least I've observed in my experience, that's in addition to that, in that there's almost a sense of also outcry from honestly, sorrow for the fact that these things are in the world. It's not all just angry. Some of it actually is just sad and pathetic, if we can really use those words, but that's not a negative thing.
Desperation.
Exactly. And even the dress, right? The black. This is a color of mourning.
Mhm.
There's something broken in the world, and that's a tragic thing. And this is a music that endeavors to bemoan that.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
and more than even bemoan is in some sense confront it,
Right.
And that's why I said it that way. It's you, this is, look at me, this is unacceptable. You're like, you're unacceptable. You're like, yeah, I am society. It's something like that, and it's like that's which is ironic, because the song that I sent you earlier, Tyler, that's the last line in it. It says, incarnation of society,
Right.
the face of evil is the face of need. I think that's absolutely profound.
The other part that the like heavy music community does very well, and then it also when Christian music started coming into it, also just straight up took in as well, is the metal community is really well with unity.
Yeah.
Very well with unity. You go to a metalcore show and everyone, most of the time, everyone's buddies, everyone is friends, and there for each other. One of the reasons I love going to shows is because I always make friends. I mean, I have lots of friends who go there already, so I see them, but I always make new friends. And I've made some lifelong great friends going to shows. And that is no different with Christian metal. And we in the Christian metal community, we have taken that and almost even made it a church family type of thing.
Yeah.
The
right?
community.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that went from the normal metal community to the Christian metal community that just really, really, it was emphasized, and we took on and just really just extended the body of Christ through metal music.
And that's the goal. That is the absolute goal, is to build the kingdom. Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say there's like the unspoken understanding, right? At any metal show, hardcore show, what have you, that we're all brothers in the pit. Right. And that really shines. So even as violent as moshing looks, look, I've never been to a show where I fell down in the mosh pit and like 8 beefy dudes didn't crowd around me to make sure that I didn't get trampled. Yeah. And they pick you back up, make sure you're okay, and then they throw you back in. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a beautiful thing, really.
One rule of moshing: someone falls down, you always pick them back up.
Yes.
This, and just to give a little bit more love to the band, like you mentioned earlier, Silent Planet. I was at a show of theirs in Fresno, in California, and there was a guy who was there, and he when he fell down, somebody also fell down on him, and they crossed legs. He like dislocated a portion of his ankle, and immediately they stopped the show. They stopped the show. They made sure like everything, not only the band, the crowd stopped the show. They notified and said, wait, like, no, stop. And then they stopped playing. Everybody was concerned. They got this guy a medic. They didn't start again until this kid had a front row seat on the side of the stage so that he could still chill out. And everybody, like he got to sit with the band for the meet and greet afterward. It was so remarkable how instantaneously the room went from what seems like darkness to something that looked so much like the Christian community that it was already there under the surface. The same way that like you don't get a forest fire from dropping a cigarette if the deadwood's not already there. Like it's already there underneath that community. It might be unspoken. And like I said, in an internet form, it's kind of leaderless, but it's like, it's unified under the spirit of something like camaraderie, right? But a camaraderie that's tied directly to this kind of, like you said, mutual combative, like we're both looking in the same direction, not looking at each other. It's a special kind of relation.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it so deeper, like draw for those people who are kind of that mindset is like, yeah, you're not looking to make me acceptable. You're looking to make me better.
Guys, we do have an audience question from Brad's other half, Seamus McGowan. Question from the crowd: what would you say to somebody whose argument is, quote, we should be avoiding the appearance of evil? Anybody who wants to jump in on that? Brad, since it's your co-host asking, I'll let you have first stab at that.
This is one of those things where, okay, so what exactly is the appearance of evil in this aspect? And this is actually where, in particular, Seamus's and my theological position with respect to the Torah becomes very important, because if we understand that sin is evil, then the definition of sin is inherently affecting what the definition of evil is, and therefore its appearance, which things of a dark theme really don't qualify, right? It's that's a stigma that has been built up by the what's the words that I'm looking for, the prudish, puritanical, legalistic response to the free love movement, right? That's and it's existed forever. My music theory fans, you guys are going to know Diabolos in Musica, right? The devil in music. It's a tritone, right? It's just dissonance. It's not evil. It just sounds unsettling.
Right. And, just to add to that, Brad, and then Chick, I'll let you take it. But I love how you said that, man. What is evil? Is anger at sin evil? No, absolutely not. That would be righteous, right? And so what is, oh man, I just had it. Be angry and do not sin. Ephesians 4, I believe. Be angry and do not sin. Murder comes from anger. Yes, it does. But what is the object of your anger? Because if we're talking about killing our flesh and murdering sin, then that is a righteous act. And to me, anyway, seeing the expressions, I've got lyrics up here from For Today. It's Crown of Thorns. The first time I heard that song, guys, I cried my eyes out. I'm going to read the lyrics for you here in just a second. But Chick, what would you say to Shame? Now, I think, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but Seamus is playing a little bit of devil's advocate here. Seamus is a fellow metalhead. Okay. Yeah, I thought so.
No, Seamus is definitely a metalhead.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I heard you guys talking about Breaking Ben on your, I think it was your first Trinity episode. And I like that. So anyway, but Chick, so how would you answer it? What would you say to someone whose argument is we should be avoiding the appearance of evil?
So I'm really with you guys where it's like, what's really evil? And I think a really great way to approach that question is, well, let's look at the fruit of something. Mm-hmm. What fruit does it bear? Because there's a lot of things that can look the same thing as other things that are evil, right? So you can say like well, this this worship band is awesome, and they're playing music that sounds like Hillsong, and we know as of recently some of the things have been going down at Hillsong. So like, yet something that sounds like Hillsong than the actual people of Hillsong, they sound the same, but the results are different, right? Hey,
What's up, Seamus?
so
Surprise.
I would say look at the fruit of something, and if because Jesus said you'll know false prophets by their fruit. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say an example of kind of what you're describing is this, right? You can take a handgun, right? Now, this could be a murder weapon, and that's evil. Or it could be the thing that saved a woman's life who was about to be mugged or raped, right?
Yeah.
That's a good thing. So this is now subjective. It's a tool. What you do with it determines whether or not it's evil.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a conveyor belt.
Right. Seamus McGowan, what is
Hello.
going on, my friend? This is Seamus and I were kind of texting, and I sent him the link. I said, man, get on here. And he said he was driving. And so it looks like you got to your destination, my friend. So how would you, let me just ask you this, playing devil's advocate there, how would you answer your own question? What would you say to somebody that said, how we should be staying away from anything that appears evil? Would you kind of agree with what we've been saying, or how would you answer that personally?
So I think actually, I think Brad sort of touched on this a little bit on like how do we know exactly what evil looks like in all cases? Sometimes things are just so subjective. And so, the prohibition from the more Judaic perspective, the avoiding the appearance of evil is better translated actually to basically avoid the appearance of idolatry or sin. So it's usually directed in that way. And I was just trying to take that concept and apply it here. But even in Judaism, they agree that this doesn't apply here because dark clothing, they like most Jews wear all black all the time because they're in constant mourning for the destruction of the temple. And so music that has an angry tone is or even a mournful tone is not necessarily the appearance of evil. It can be in certain sense, but by and large, like you guys are already saying, it's kind of like expressing anger or even mourning. And so Judaism has already largely agreed that there's no genre that's outside of the purview of available worship music, because music in and of itself cannot be inherently evil.
We used to reformat worship music. Like, man, we had this awesome, me and Seamus like co-wrote this awesome version of Praise You in the Storm by Casting Crowns. It's like,
oh, wow.
Like, dude, to listen to that song now by Casting Crowns, I'm like, man, it doesn't have the punch. Like I can't worship to this anymore.
Great
We need
song
to
by
re-record our
Casting Crowns.
version.
Man, if you guys do send me that, I love hearing metalized versions of like contemporary music. And
that used to be our thing,
James
man.
Franchise is good at that. If you're listening to this, James, I love you. So look that guy up, James Franchise.
Right on. Josh, you didn't get to answer on Seamus's question. How would you answer somebody who came to you and asked, well, we should be, or saying their argument is we should be avoiding the appearance of evil?
Well, it's not necessarily not necessarily differently than how it's been answered already, but
yeah.
As you know, I'm kind of I have an affinity for trying to figure out what somebody means by something, and so it would be, what do you mean by dark or evil? Like what's the thing? And that's why earlier I was trying to make that associative kind of thinking explicit so that we could think about like, well, when you say it appears evil, let's just say then you're looking at the appearance, right? So you mean visually it looks evil? Are you talking about like the dark makeup? Or are you talking about the long hair? You talking about the head banging, or whatever kind of thing? There's a lot of tone that goes into metal and the surrounding imagery that's usually used for metal bands. Some metal bands you know, especially when they're live, they tend to be rather silly because, you know, they're not like just evil, dark, angry characters. They're actually normal people that just love this kind of music. And like me, I'm a big goofball. I can be serious, but I'm a total goofball. And I like to laugh because it's awesome. I like smiling because smiling's my favorite, right? Like these are like it's fine to be a silly goofball, right? And sometimes when you're doing something like that, you can use the irony to your advantage, right? There's a band that I got to see at the Ace of Spades when I was in like 2006 or 7 or
Yeah.
something like that, and it was Plea for Purging.
Oh, I love
And
Purging.
oh, dude, that was so cool. This huge biker-looking guy with
yeah,
this bald head comes out, and
yeah.
he's massive. He's like a huge guy, and he's wearing a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air shirt that's pink, and it says "Stay Funky Fresh." And I'm just like, that is awesome. You're like the standout guy from all the weirdos who stand out. Like you stand out among the standouters. Like pro, right? And to notice like this, that's because it's acceptable. You find the extreme, right? And it's like noticing the people who naturally gravitate toward extremes. Let's say there needs to be somebody who can enter that space enough to be like, look, there's a border, right? Like you can still like, this is the thing, right? But we're unified. Like we were saying before, like there's something about this place that we're all in. Like we're all in the same headspace about this, right? It's like sometimes it's centered around the darkness that is present, right? But it's like, when was the last time you heard a contemporary Christian song confront Satan? Not just mention him, not today, Satan, right? Not
But you're
just
talking
this
about
kind of like
confrontation.
dismissive, like, oh, if I just believe hard enough, by golly, my life's gonna be great, you know? And like I don't see the kind of like, you know, pick up the gauntlet and look the world in the face and say, look, this is like, there's truth, there's good. That means that there's lies and there's evil. So which is it? Whose side are you really on, right? And it's like, leave it to the most combative people to really pick a side, you know, because that's what I really admire about the Christian metal community is they're like, look, I already don't care what you think. Sorry, don't. I care about you, and that's fine. I don't have to care about what you think to do that, you know, especially what you think of me, whatever, you know. It's like like we all said, like if you really knew the darkest parts of me, you wouldn't even be regarding me, you know. And it's like, but God knows those parts and he loves me more than you ever could. So what are you going to give me? You can't take away what you didn't give me, bro. Like, I don't care, you know. It's like, if you can carry that over, not from the darkness but right over into the light, and it's like, well, now I can walk into spaces where I don't have to worry about being accepted as part of the fold or whatever. Like if I'm a Christian and I go to a back alley or a bar with my Christian metal band to go play some music along with other secular bands, and I stop after my third song when I'm supposed to announce the band members, and instead I preach the gospel for 2 or 3 minutes and I let them boo me, then we go back to the music. And that one person that's in the back is crying because you confronted his sin. He's going to come to the table afterward. He's going to pray with you. It's like, is that not worth it? Confronting the darkness. Where else are you going to do it? In the church?
That seems, if I'm being honest, if people are confronting the darkness in the church, it shows me one thing, and that's that they're scared. It's that they're actually scared to step out into the muck, into the filth, and say, yes, I'm right here with you, though. And to lean, you know, I've said it before on CSG, and I'll say it again. You can speak to one person, and someone you don't even know who is listening, even if it goes over the head of the person you're speaking to, that one person that you have no idea that could be sitting behind in another room or somewhere at work, you don't know, setting the table behind you at lunch, they could be impacted by that. The Holy Spirit could fall on them and they could be impacted by it, and you're not even talking directly to them. And so with that being said, I want to segue. We're at 1:05. Seamus just joined us. And so what I want to do real quick, I want to read Crown of Thorns. I'm not going to read it all. I just want to read bits and pieces of it, get your guys' thoughts. And then I've got a man, I've been kind of looking through this article from truediscipleship.com. 10 scriptural reasons why the rock beat is evil in any form. And so there are reasons on here, and I want to get arguments. Do what?
This will be fun.
Yes, it will. And so we won't go through all 10, but I want to pick the kind of juiciest ones. But first for today, Crown of Thorns. I wish I had the song, but you might be able to understand him. You might be able to first time listening.
Maddie's got a way of articulating.
He
really,
does
really well.
He really does, even whenever he's screaming. And so with that being said, I'll just read the first, couple verses here of the Crown of Thorns. We crown him with a crown of thorns. This is the end of a life that's been poured out for all mankind. In suffering, manifest glory has come at the fullness of time. King of kings, beaten and broken down. Why would he live like a servant? King of kings, descending lower now. Why should he die like a slave? The proud will be humbled. The meek will inherit the earth. The last will be first to inherit the earth. I know down is the way up. So, Master, show me how to serve. The last will be first to inherit the earth. The less will be first to inherit the earth. It should have been me, with the nails through my hands. Man, guys, I'm about to start crying because this is the part where I cried up. With the nails through my hands and feet, facing the wrath of God. It should have been me, left to pay for my forsaken sin. But in the blood I stand here. It should have been me, born to die. He bore the fire of God's holy wrath on his shoulders, born to die. I watched him pour out his life as a ransom for all. And as he carried his cross on his back, beaten and bloody, I saw myself there too, because I've been broken by a world that hates me, but I'm not alone anymore. Alone no more. No one can take his life. He laid it down for me. That twisted wreath of thorns, yeah, he took that crown for me. Then after 3 days, out of the ground for me, he overcame it all. Now I live to serve him with stripes on his back, betrayed by the ones he loves so perfectly. We spit in his face and we crowned him. We crowned him with a crown of thorns. I said I wasn't going to read it all, but I had to. And that's the lyrics. That's the lyrics to the entire song. And
That's
so
a song about Good Friday.
It is. It is. And this being Easter, Passion Week, Friday coming up is Good Friday. Sunday, he rose from the dead. We're celebrating that, right? And Seamus, let me get your we'll go around, we'll start with Seamus. What are your thoughts on Maddie's lyrics there?
That's Crown of Thorns, right? I've heard that song, and it was a while ago. Funny enough, the person who introduced me to that song, this was a little bit ago, was we were in the Marines. We were out doing some training, and so we were sitting around. We had some downtime. We were passing music around. This guy was like, "You got to listen to this," and I was like jamming to it. And I was like, "Man, this is really good." And I was kind of listening to the lyrics in the back of my head, and I was going, "Hold on, this guy?" And I looked at him, and this guy is like not a Christian. But I'm looking at him like, you know what this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Oh yeah, Christ Core. This is my stuff. I love Christ Core." And I was like,
"What?"
I was so taken aback. And I love that song because it's really good, and it's got a great message. And I remember one day going home and having a sort of similar thought process, that feeling where like you get a little bit of emotionally overwhelmed from the truth of it. Mm-hmm. And you've heard Convictions, right? The band.
Mm-hmm.
The Price of Grace. You familiar with that one?
I have not heard that one.
My man's wearing a Conviction shirt. It's a newer song. I think it's newer anyway.
Yeah, it's off their last album.
Yeah. Okay. So, but like from something just that I wanted to point out before handing it off to the next person is that what you're going to get from Christcore or Christian metal bands is a sense of real down to earthism. Like real raw emotionism, like just raw, real stuff. And so that song, as well as The Price of Grace, which is it's about a suicide from his buddy, and it is just an emotional wreck when you listen to it. But it's so real and it's really good. And that's the kind of thing that you're going to get with these Christian metal bands, is you're going to get this real raw kind of emotional feeling that I think, you're not going to get that same thing from just Christian contemporary music. You're not going to be able to connect in the same way with that kind of genre. So this genre is an avenue for making that connection in a place that would otherwise be hard to make with another type of genre. So I love that song for that reason. And that's another one I just wanted to bring up was Convictions, because they have a very similar vibe. It's just emotionally raw. Love it.
I'll have to check that. Send me a link to that later if you would, Seamus. That'd
Absolutely.
be great to look at. All right, Chick, what you got for us, brother?
So when you were reading the lyrics and you went into the "it should have been me" part,
Yeah,
put it down, went right in my eyes. Yes,
yeah.
That part's so heavy now. Which, by the way, Seamus, I just saw Convictions last week on their tour with Earth Groans, and I cried during the part in Price of Grace when they play the answering machine part. The voicemail, and I cried because it's talking about the friend that committed suicide and like but yeah,
it's rough. It'll mess you up.
And that was Convictions has been doing this for almost like 10 years now. So they have a lot of music. That's their whole thing, is making music that is, one, Christ-centered and worshiping God at the same time. Just, oh my gosh, is a giant gut punch. But yeah, I love Crown of Thorns. And For Today has lots of other songs.
Oh yeah.
Just like that. It's crazy that we have music in Christian metal that is straight up like, because CCM will have some stuff that kind of just like float around it and try to be kind of neutral about the crucifixion, but then you got For Today with Crown of Thorns that just straight up brutal, which I think is such an appropriate way to talk about Good Friday, is how brutal and heavy everything is. I mean, I had one guy in my comments on my TikTok say like, "Oh yeah, Jesus dying on the cross is the most metal thing to happen ever in history." I'm like, yeah, exactly. So I think the most appropriate way to express what Good Friday is and what it means is through metalcore. So yeah, For Today's fully goated. I love them.
Amen. Brad, what's your thoughts on Crown of Thorns?
Man, that is a song that hits home. And given the theme of it and the time of year especially. So another song that it reminds me of, and this kind of really falls in with the whole Tim Lambesis thing too, because this is another iconic Christian artist, not metal, but an iconic Christian artist that had a downfall. And it doesn't change the fact that the music that they wrote before that downfall is still good and it's still incredible. But it reminds me a lot thematically, with especially from the lyrics, of Watch the Lamb by Ray Boltz, which Ray Boltz is a Christian contemporary artist from like the early 90s, like the late 80s and early 90s. But he was iconic for his time as a lyricist. And it's because he really came up with unique ideas, very similar to what For Today has done. So the song Watch the Lamb in particular is about it's about having watched the crucifixion from the perspective of the guy who helped Jesus carry the cross.
Oh, Simon
Joseph.
Yes, it's this whole story that goes over. He's there in town with his kids, and then you watch describing the scene where he stumbles under the cross, and the Roman soldier screams at him to, hey, you carry his cross, right? And just that whole scene, and it gives off the same vibe, even though it's certainly not as intense, in the music stylings. But yeah, so Ray Boltz came out of the closet as homosexual. and like was just blacklisted from the Christian music world from that point. And like people just got rid of all of his music altogether. I'm like, guys, his music is still good though. Like, you know, there's no reason that what he wrote is not worth listening to. And
Wait till they find out what David did, the psalm writer.
right. So yeah, it's just those two songs in particular are two of my favorites for this time of year, I think. Definitely Crown of Thorns and Watch the Lamb, and they're just such opposite ends of the spectrum musically, but lyrically they're like neck and neck with one another.
Right. Josh, what's your thoughts on Crown of Thorns? And then I want to get into 10 scriptural reasons why the rock beat is evil in any form.
Well, you know what? I really love that song personally because of the fact that the first time I ever heard it, like you, it packed such an emotional punch that it felt like I was experiencing a kind of vulnerability in listening to it. You know?
Yes.
And it didn't, and what's strange is it's almost threateningly vulnerable how you feel.
Yes.
Because you listen and you hear this guy with complete guttural conviction screaming about Jesus being murdered by being tortured to death.
Yeah.
And the purpose, and then also the drop that they do when, and this is why I think that metal is such a great conveyor belt or a tool, like we've been saying. The way that the band is able to stop in unison for just a few seconds while Maddie brings out the let's say the more hoarse throat kind of guttural growling scream where he says it should have been me.
Yeah.
And right as he says me, the band comes back in and drops this really heavy chugging rhythm. And it's like the way that it all comes out together is very much the same kind of emotional composition that you would get if you played traditional worship music in a contemporary church.
Yes.
As I do, because I play the drums for my church worship group. I know that in those parts where I'm playing songs where I don't use the snare drum, I might use the floor tom sometimes, but I'm basically using the ride and the hi-hat. It's real gentle. It's real quiet. I'm pacing. I'm not playing the drums. I'm just creating a pace and an aesthetic in the backdrop. And I can use a crescendoed cymbal. Shh. Right as a chord transition happens and the music is going to get to the most potent part of the lyrical content. And I drive that emotional force like a conveyor belt right through the room. Boom. And all I'm doing is using an instrument technique in order to do it. Tell me the practical difference between how that can drop on you something warm like a blanket, whereas Maddie's lyrical content and that delivery is dropping something like a hammer on an anvil. Right? It's like, I can see how that's intimidating, and I'll grant it to you because it is. But it is also incredibly penetrating, and it creates a vulnerable kind of feeling to the listener when you're confronted that way. And it is confrontational. It's what it is. And I'm not a person who particularly likes conflict. And so it can be unnerving to hear somebody scream the unwanted truth at you. But at the same time, noticing, like we said, the depth and the impact of the listener, as well as what it would mean to the person who penned these lyrics down and is contemplating this whole thing, right? He's not just thinking about death for death's sake so that he can feel dark. That's not what he's doing. Right. He's actually looking at the place where the history of the universe got its darkest. Right? And then to look that square in the face and say, you know what? That should have been me.
Yep.
Oh, I don't think there's anything that, like, that's about as Christian as it gets, isn't it?
Yeah. That's exactly what I was getting ready to say, is whenever I heard that for the first time, the pause, it should have been me. Guys, that's the first step of the gospel. You've got to realize that it should have been you, it should have been me, it should have been all of us on that cross. Jesus, the sinless Son of God, didn't deserve it, and yet at the same time, it was the greatest. Josh, you're absolutely right. It was the darkest moment in history, and at the exact same time, it was the most glorious thing that could have ever happened for us. It was the most glorious thing that ever could have happened, because in that moment, we were set free. You know what I'm saying? And so it gives me goosebumps every time I hear that, those words, and it brings me back to my foundation. I read the book of Revelation recently, and I forget which church it was to, but whenever John wrote, "Return to your first love," that's it. Getting in that spot, getting in the dark with your sin, and knowing that's what you are on the inside. It's at that moment you become free. And to really hear it and go back to that, it made me want to fall down and worship God even more. You know what I'm saying? And it bums me whenever I see and I read articles like this. And I'm going to give the first one. Again, this is from truediscipleship.com. I'm just going to read it as it is, black and white. And we'll start with Chick. But I want to see how you would respond to this. And so they go on and they give a definition of this rock beat, and it says this: the rock beat is a dominant and repetitious offbeat which competes with the melody and distracts from the words of a song. The contradictory message in the beat, the words, the melody, the style of the presentation, and the appearance of the musicians all create a subtle confusion in their minds, or in the minds, wills, and emotions of the listeners, which leads them to question the absolute moral standards of God. I'm trying to read this with a straight face, guys. Help me out here. So all of that, I mean, Brad, you nailed it a while ago, man. That's subjective, right? It's all subjective. But let me continue real quick, and then Chick will get your thoughts, and we'll just go around the table on the first one. So here we go. The rock beat, number one. This is the number one reason why this rock beat is evil. So the rock beat deceives youth into violating the fifth commandment. The fifth commandment is honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Well, I can go ahead and just comment on this. These are probably independent, fundamental, Baptist, King James only people. And so we'll go with that. Now, the New Testament reaffirms this commandment: honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with thee and thou mayest live long on the earth. Ephesians 6:2-3. There's no question that many parents are strongly opposed to the rock beat. Therefore, those who promote the rock beat are causing young people to dishonor their fathers and their mothers. End quote. Chick, what you got?
Did this person time travel from the 50s and write this article?
They Peter Griffin and hit a time warp portal, and no.
I mean, I'm not going to make a argument. I can't, but like, I got my love for music from my parents, so I'm not dishonoring my parents. And my parents, like, they were super cool with my music taste growing up. Even though it's not their thing, but they were really cool with it. I was in some bands in high school, and my mom went to my shows.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely not her thing.
Shoot.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's parts. There's parts in Psalms where it says, worship God with loud clashing cymbals. Worship God with expertly playing your instruments. So like, I don't know, man. Like, it's in the Bible. It's pretty clear that we're supposed to be worshiping God loudly at some points. So like, yeah. I don't know.
I'm kind of confused, really, on it. The rock beat. Are they trying to say like the off beat? Is that what
they're trying to talk about? Syncopated rhythm.
Yeah.
Like reggae, though.
Yeah. So basically, like if I can make it as crude as possible,
yeah,
they're saying that do cat do is evil.
Yeah.
Cat do. Boots and cats are
Yeah,
evil.
like money
Right.
evil. Like the only music you should be listening to is Gregorian chant and hymns. Sure. Cool.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
You know,
because
on-
Gregorian chants never sound eerie.
Ah,
On that,
Mm.
actually, so we had discussed earlier whether or not anybody has ever or any of us have seen a discussion on this subject from the affirmative, and I lied. I didn't lie. I forgot. But
Oh.
the church, the
You
church
sinner.
split.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know Will and Brian from the
Yeah.
church split. They're awesome guys. Matter of fact, I'm drinking out of their their glass right now.
Shout out.
They did an episode, not so much on this subject, but it touched on this subject, where basically he just goes over the evolution of music and what was considered edgy back then, and it kind of all
Oh.
throughout time. And
gotta do
he
that.
kind of finished on Christian metal, you know, for those reasons. And yeah, he same conclusion. He's like, all they're arguing against is syncopation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Syncopation and triads and harmonic minors is basically like that's the sound. All three of those things just combined. If you had like the sound that people can think of stereotypically when I say vampire or Dracula, right? Like that eerie note right there at the
The
end,
natural
like
minor.
a minor key, but you use a major seventh and then you sweep right back up. That sound is actually used universally in many happy songs.
Yes.
Mm.
And yet the context that it's placed in makes it sound dissonant. It's
Yes.
not evil. It's technically math,
Yes.
right? So it's like these are people who, and this is why I appreciate the fact that we're like, Seamus, are you a musician as well?
I am.
Wonderful. We're all
He taught me
musicians
music
here.
theory.
So,
Nice.
so we're all musicians here, and so we understand when we say it sounds this way. It's like, yeah, it's a simple technique of patterning in order to recreate a sound, and I can do the same thing with my voice when I make funny impressions of people that I've heard before. Right? I can give them a emotion or an inflection that makes them sound angry or sad or whatever, and it's like all I'm doing is keeping the voice and putting in a different context. Right? It's like the pattern is the pattern. It is what it is, right? And it's like it's not as though rock music invented that pattern at all. Like even remotely.
No.
Let alone Western music. Like
Right.
it's silly because like the claves beat in Spanish countries is traditionally like seen as something that's like a normal backdrop beat where it's just like ba 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 ba, right? If you took that and you put a bunch of drums on top of it, that's like hello, that's like
Yes.
1,000 different metal songs.
Right.
1,000.
Exactly. It's one of those things where hearing that read out loud just kind of made me question. I'm not even that like extremely well versed on music theory, but it's funny because I'm like, this person can't know music. There's no way that they have like a grasp on music theory if this is what they're writing about.
Yeah.
I was gonna say you take that strict definition and Summer by Antonio Vivaldi in his Four Seasons. Summer qualifies under that definition. And so
So there's something to that though. And I read this, I read an article like I want to say 3 or 4 months ago, where apparently research has been done, and what they have concluded is that the modern metalhead is the equivalent of what all of the old composers were.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the way we think is exactly how they thought. And I mean, that's more or less true. If you take any old classical piece and put it on electric guitar, it automatically sounds metal. You don't even need the drums behind it to make that happen.
Right. There's one thing that really kind of stood out to me on this first and it seems like there's a fallacy, but I'm having trouble kind of finding it. But let me just repeat it, and Seamus, I'll get your thoughts on this. But there is no question that many parents are strongly opposed to the rock beat. Therefore, those who promote the rock beat are causing young people to dishonor their fathers and mothers. Is that not a logical fallacy that I'm just
Determinism.
but for real though, is it not? I mean, I
It's a
don't know the
non-sequitur.
name of it, but it seems like there's a big jump
Yeah, it's a
being made.
non-sequitur.
Non sequitur. Okay.
Well, it's a form of non sequitur, and it's I forget the exact name of it, but it's because they have already presumed that their first presupposition is the case.
Okay.
And so B follows behind it. So the first presupposition is that all parents are, or most parents are opposed to it. Well, that's already a presupposition. That's already false.
Right.
Right.
There's no data to support that.
Right. There's no data to support that. And so the secondary statement just does not follow under that premises.
Gotcha. Seamus, is there anything you would like to add before we hit the second of the 10 reasons why the rock beat is evil?
Man, I mean, if we're solely going off of, let's focus on that whole with the honor your father and mother thing.
Yeah.
My dad listened to rap growing up, like Eminem,
really,
in front of me, with me there all the time, and I wasn't into it, but.
Yeah.
Just, if we say, hey, you're dishonoring your father and mother by going against their wishes, well, I mean, I guess then I should be listening to disgusting music because that's what my parents listened to. So it's just, the equivalency can't be made there.
Gotcha. We can just see Seamus rocking out to some NWA. You know what I mean? Like, I will say this. So Straight Outta Compton, like, I really like that movie, right? Just to see what they went through, and it was crazy to see where they came from and where they went. I liked it. But all right, let's get into let's do a couple more, and then we'll start winding down. We're at about an hour and a half, and I just want to reiterate this. Thank you guys, Seamus, Brad, Chick. Thank you guys so much for doing this with me. I think that and Josh, I think that this has been, one of those episodes that, like Brad was saying before we went on, or it might have been right as we went on. This needs to be talked about. These are one of those things that I haven't heard a lot. The first person I heard talk about this was Chick, and that's why I reached out to him. I was like, man, we've got to do an episode on this because it just ain't out there, and the church needs to hear about this. And so I really appreciate you guys coming on. But let's get into
I think we lost Chick here, bro.
Did we?
Yeah, yeah.
Hold on, he's coming back on.
I was gonna say, I just noticed that his screen wasn't there anymore.
he spot, so it's cool.
The room felt so empty without you.
All right, a second witness on how the rock beat leads you to. Oh wait, hold on. Okay, here we go. The rock beat violates God's command to, quote, give no place to the devil. When sons and daughters disregard the. Oh wait, hold on. I'm sorry, guys. This is still on that first one. I apologize. Judge all things that are
I feel like that fallacy we were looking for is like a weird form of a Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Now, for those who don't know, what is it? Because I've not heard of that.
So technically, the actual definition of a Texas sharpshooter fallacy is like you cherry picked data from a cluster to suit your argument and found the pattern to fit. So like you took a shot and then painted the target around it.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I like that.
I do too. Let's see. Yeah. Josh, you got anything that? While I'm looking for this is a really long article. I apologize again, guys.
I wanted to kind of mention and praise the fact that I feel like a lot of the friends that I've come to find that like, oh, you like metal also. It's like those are usually the people who are willing to ask the hardest questions.
Yes.
Those are the people who are willing to have the deepest conversations. Those are the people who are willing to be challenged and challenge other people. Those are the people who are usually stubborn enough to be able to see when something should change their mind, and sometimes are willing to be the weirdo enough that they do change their mind. And these are some of the most respectable human beings That is like just thinking about the correlations here when we say like the the appearance of darkness or something like that. It brings to mind for me, the way that God presented himself to some of the prophets in the Old Testament, wrapped in a cloud of darkness with light within himself. It's like
Yes.
light within himself.
Well, that even goes back to Genesis, man. So, what do we read in Genesis 1:2 is that darkness was over the surface of the waters,
And the
Spirit of God
moved.
hovered over the surface of the deep. There's a doublet there.
Yeah. Yeah. You would think that with the Spirit, like, and this is the thing, is it's like you would think that if the Spirit was present, darkness could not be, right?
Mhm.
But instead, he's moving around among it. And then when the word meets that Spirit, the darkness like is separate.
So
like that's what created the separation there between light and darkness, is when God spoke and the Spirit was there.
It's one of the interesting things actually about one of the things that I love about Hebrew. So like darkness, there are multiple words in Hebrew that in English would translate as darkness, and they all mean something different.
Oh yeah.
And so even in terms of like the mysterious, the unknowable, right? That is technically darkness, right? Because you're in the dark about it. You're not, the light has not been shed on you. But
Right.
like that is what God is. He is unknowable. So an aspect of God is absolutely darkness.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, and it's funny because I really like one of the things that I'm really passionate about, especially recently in study wise, is developing a way of looking at the world that's kind of centered more around a narrative space rather than just the idea of a dry logic and me being an observer, cleanly separated somehow from the universe that I inhabit. It's like, no, I'm part of this thing, and what I do when I behave, when I plan, when I think, I behave as though I'm part of a story, right? And so to think about it this way is like that space that we inhabit, there are things that comprise that space. One of those things is darkness. One of those things is light. One of those things is known things, and one of those things is unknown things. Some of those things that are unknown are knowable. Some of those things that are unknown are not knowable. And it's like, what are the things that we use visually or symbolically to represent those things? It's like darkness, caves, dragons. Let's say, the barbarian on the outside of the wall. That's like that impending threat. But it's like
War of Ages.
Think about it. Like what's yeah, it's like there. It's terrifying to think like what's on the outside of what I know, right? But it's like that again needs something to confront it, so.
Yeah, it's one of those incredible things, like because it takes light to create darkness on a certain level, right? You can't cast a shadow without a source of light. That it's just an impossibility. So I think that the light dark dichotomy that Christianity has become hyper focused on, I think is in a big way misunderstood.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. I agree a lot.
Agree too. All right, guys. I 100% agree. I think I got something else from this article, and it's so I should have read this before, but this is like a testimony. So apparently this is a letter. It's small, it's short, written by Reverend Joe Myers from Tacoma, Washington. And I want to get y'all's input on this, and then we'll start winding down. He says this in this article, and it's a letter apparently written to the author of the article. It says this, quote, "In 1981, I was driving down a jungle road in the Ivory Coast with several African pastors in the car with me. I had recently received a couple of cassette tapes from our denominational headquarters that were intended for our teenage daughter. These were recordings of various Christian rock artists. In listening to the tapes, I was very disturbed in my own spirit that such material was being sent to our missionary kids. But not trusting my own reaction alone and realizing that these pastors with whom I was traveling were very sensitive to the spirit world, both good and evil, I decided to play the tapes for them. The reaction I got was immediate and verbally violent. One of the pastors asked me this question: do you mean to tell us this kind of music is played in your churches in America? I answered in the affirmative. His response was filled with disgust and anger, and he replied with another question. What are you doing allowing your church people in America to call up evil spirits with their music? And then a second letter is from this David Brown, age 16, from Arizona. And then we'll go around the round table to get feedback on these two letters, because it disturbs me. It seems almost like, I don't know, it seems fishy to me, and you'll see why here in just a second. So this is from, again, David Brown, age 16. I started listening to contemporary Christian music about 4 years ago. I thought that the music was okay and I enjoyed it, but one day I was listening to a Christian radio station and a song came on that I never heard. I liked the song even though it was questionable. When the group who played that song came to town, I went to their concert with some friends. I knew, however, that my parents would not have approved had they known what type of music was played. After the concert, I borrowed money from a friend to buy their tape. I brought it home, but my parents did not want me to keep it. I did anyway. I listened to it all the time and finally bought some other Christian rock tapes, even though my parents did not want me to. I listened to them for a while, but soon got bored with them. Then I started listening to secular rock and on a light rock station without my parents' knowledge. I began to want to listen to rock music more and more, and I began to enjoy the harder stuff. I soon changed stations to a hard rock station so I could listen to the harder stuff. After listening to that station for about a year, all without my parents' knowledge, I found that the stuff I liked, that station could play only at night. So I got the tapes of some of the groups I liked, and I found that I loved heavy metal. I just couldn't get enough. When I finally faced the reality of how wrong I was, I made commitments to give it up. However, I still struggle with it daily. Every time I hear it, I am tempted to get back into it. So maybe not so much from the Reverend, or if you guys want to comment on that, please feel free. But to a 16-year-old kid, if he had wrote this to one of y'all, Chick, we'll start with you. How would you respond? To me, it almost sounds like a drug, right? That he started off with something, maybe not
drug.
Yeah, a gateway drug. Not so bad, and then moved on to the harder stuff and the harder stuff and the harder stuff. Sounds like a drug to me. And so, is that what y'all are kind of getting as well, or how would you respond if a 16-year-old kid came up to you or wrote you that letter?
If it's okay, I would like to make a comment on the first one also, because
yeah.
I don't know where you guys are fall theologically, but we're reformed. So I'm very into like the solas and stuff.
I'm reformed with you, brother.
So like, I don't know, when people say stuff like, "Oh, I felt this in my spirit," I'm like, your spirit? Like, I'm very big into sola scriptura. It's like, okay, so why aren't you leaning on scripture more than what your spirit, which, according to, in Jeremiah, when Jeremiah or in God says, the heart is deceitful above all, who can know it? How do you not know you're leaning on your own intuition and your own feelings about something when you say stuff? Oh, I felt this in my spirit, right? And also, he said my spirit. Did he say the Holy Spirit? No, he said my spirit. So I'm like, okay, whatever, dude. Anyways, I used to be a youth pastor. So being a former youth pastor, putting my youth pastor hat on right now, I would say a lot of the feelings that 16-year-old kid is feeling comes from, this is a little bit hyperbole, so I don't really mean the full length of this word, but it seems like a little bit of indoctrination to, like,
it's kind of what I was thinking.
Right.
Yep.
Growing up, especially since he's still a kid, growing up being indoctrinated to think a certain way. So now all this, time as an impressionable youth, being told and conditioned, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And then all that psychological damage gets affected. And then now you think, oh, this music that I was indoctrinated, conditioned to think is bad feels like a drug now, So that's kind of what I think about. And if this kid came to my youth group when I was a youth pastor, would come to my youth group, I would show him, hey, look at these lyrics though. Look at these testimonies from me and my friends about our relationships with the guys in these bands. Heck, Leroy from War of Ages, which we mentioned, War of Ages. Leroy War of Ages is a pastor in Dayton, Ohio. So like, I don't see how you can get this kind of music as a drug, or almost like a drug, from pastors who write this kind of music.
Right. I hear what you're saying with the indoctrination thing. It's almost, to me, if I was reading this letter, somebody wrote this letter to me, my response would be, well, why? Why do you believe this is wrong? Is it because your parents told you it was wrong? Because there was never a reason given. He just assumes the fact that,
Right.
this is bad because I've been told all of my life this is bad. And of course, being a 16-year-old kid, I'm already going through, I know how I was at 16, y'all, and I'm sure y'all remember too, right?
Mhm.
But I had a whole bunch of different things. I was just getting out there. I was starting to explore. I was coming out of my flower, so to say, right? Like, I was very confused at 16, and to hear these different things going back and forth, I could see how that would have more an effect on an individual, a 16-year-old boy, than the music itself, right? What was you listening to? You know what I mean? What CDs was it that you were buying? Did you think, was this really not Christian? Like, there's so many questions that I would have from these letters. But Seamus, what's your thoughts on a couple of these letters, bro?
So yeah, it's kind of like, I don't want to. It's not false guilt, misplaced guilt.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like you were made to feel guilty about something that you should not be feeling guilty about, and
Mhm.
yeah, indoctrination. I mean, you guys kind of touched it. And so I don't know. I think my response would be to kind of ease him back into it at a comfortable pace, so he doesn't feel overwhelmed or anything. Because this is it's yeah. It might sound like I'm overplaying this. This is a type of emotional trauma that he has to deal with. And even though it's a tiny, minuscule version of emotional trauma, and just because it's not some big emotionally traumatic event that we tend to associate with the word, it still qualifies psychologically as a type of emotional trauma. No matter how minuscule, you should not downplay it just because comparing yourself to somebody else, you think, well, it doesn't qualify. It qualifies. So, to kind of reel that back in, it's very much on getting to get him in his mind to convince himself that his guilt was misplaced and he has no reason to feel that way. And that's kind of, you walk them through that with scriptural analysis, and then reintroduction to something like that. Like if it's something he enjoys, but you want to make sure, he's not in a really uncomfortable position, like you're forcing it on him. Every case is
That's
unique
right.
and individual, but the first thing is making sure that he understands that the guilt he's feeling is misplaced. He should not. He's committed no evil. He's done no wrong. And once he gets that, then the rest will follow.
Just to add kind of to that, Seamus, I wonder, is it, one of those questions that I would have, are you feeling guilty because you listen to music, or are you feeling guilty because you didn't tell your parents about it? Because he kept saying that over and over again, like that was the source of his guilt, not maybe being deceptive to his parents. And I would just say, if you think, any kids watching this right now, if you think you're doing something wrong, man, talk to your parents about it. Talk to them, because that is the worst thing you can do. I've done it, right? I'm sure we all have, is not go to your parents whenever you actually need to about something. Our parents are there to talk. I've got a 2-year-old little girl, and the thing I want her to learn first and foremost is that she can trust me. She can trust me, and she might not like what I have to say, but you can come to me about whatever, you know what I mean? But Brad, what's your thoughts on David, age 16?
Man, I'm right there with you, and I actually do want to make a comment on the pastor's letter earlier too. But yeah, no, instantly as while you were reading it, it's like, well, this kid, the actual source of the guilt for this kid is that he's hiding it from his parents, right? Because that actually is a violation of a biblical principle, right? So there's a justified level of guilt there, but he is directing it in the wrong aspect of his actions, right? And in terms of treating it like a drug too, I think it's worth highlighting that it's not that it was like a drug to him necessarily that makes it so unacceptable to society. Because if we're going to be honest, the average U2 style worship music itself is often treated as a drug in many Christian circles today. I mean, and it is, it really is a manufactured experience too. Like as a former worship leader myself, I know how to manufacture that experience, right?
Right.
You know how to like calm down to the point where it's it's a cappella. There's no music. You're whispering. It's just us and God in here, right? Right. And then you slowly build up. The drums start to build up a little bit.
Yep.
The guitars start to build up a little bit, and you just build into this massive crescendo that gives people this emotional high. And it's a manufactured experience. That's not to say that it's not effective. It's not to say that it doesn't serve a purpose, but that's what a drug is, man. So it's not necessarily the fact that this kid got an emotional high off of it that made it wrong. But with respect to what the pastor wrote, right? And he was in Africa, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, we have to look at this from a pure form of context. The pastors that he let listen to these people who come from tribes that were formerly into much darker forms of voodoo and whatnot. So understand, if you're going to acknowledge their characterization of this music, you are acknowledging their validation of voodoo culture, right? Like if you can't accept that they understood if they understood good in the correct context, then you can't automatically dignify their characterization of evil within that context.
Right.
Right. And it's
I like
what it
that.
is. It's like a former alcoholic, right? To them, alcohol is sinful. That does not make alcohol sinful. To that person, it is.
Right. Romans 14. Right. There's some things that, I mean, Christianity, we are at liberty to do things, and to him that is sin, it's sin to him. You know what I mean? And so, Josh, let me get your thoughts, brother. And then I want your mom, actually, my mom too, right? My third mom, I think. She actually, nah, go ahead and comment on the letters, and then I'll get to Penelope's comment.
Well, first of all, hi, Mom. Second, coming back to what the pastor said.
Yeah.
I understand the context of a statement like, again, this sounds like, then making an association kind of thinking. If it sounds like this, it must be this. And it's the same kind of logical assumption that we would make if we say, oh, smoke, therefore fire, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of simplistic association that's being made there. There's no real desire for investigation because of how off-putting the sound is, right? And
Right.
There's a lot of things in life like that, there are a lot of things that what we would call them acquired tastes, right? They're not everybody would like to go out and like serve their community in a particular way. Like, I don't know a lot of people that go and buy a stack of 20 pizzas from Little Caesars and go out and find a homeless encampment and go, hey, I'm going to bring a bag of soap and beanies and gloves and a tarp and a pizza. I'm going to bless every person that comes out of this tent. Hey, anybody here, and then let them come out and then pray with somebody. It's like, most people wouldn't spend their Saturday doing that.
Yeah.
My wife and I like to do that. That's fine. It's really intimidating for some people to do that for the first time. Fine. Okay. But it's like, why look at that as though it's something wrong? Right. It's like, oh, well, be careful of the appearance of evil. Those people do drugs in those tents. Okay. I mean, I'm not doing them with them. I'm not imploring them to do so. But I'm also not going to come and show up and be like, expecting that these people should be just treated like a ghost, like they don't exist, or even worse, trying to come at them with something like a guilt trip because they don't have what I have, or maybe they don't have any more what I have, or maybe they had more than me and now have nothing. And it's like, do I really come to that person with all of my know-it-all know-how and try to tell them about their life? Or do I come to them with the same attitude that I think the Lord would and say, you know, God so loved the world that he gave.
Right.
You have need. I have an answer. Here you go.
Right.
You know, and it's like, that's an acquired taste to go out into the darkest places of the world, right?
Mhm.
Just like it would be an acquired taste to listen to something that's overtly aggressive while nonetheless being glorifying to God. It's like, okay, I personally don't I would rather play football than watch it, right? But that doesn't mean that people who watch football, you know, are committing some crime against football because they wouldn't actually play or
Mm,
something like that. You know, and
right.
it's like somebody's going to play the football. somebody's going to play. Lots of people are going to watch, and then there's going to be those people that are like, I don't get it. It's just, you know, people knocking into each other. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. You probably watch ballet. It's like,
Right.
you
Right.
know, whatever. Like there's any number of things that you could be using, just like Brad said, just like we've been saying all along. It's like these are just delivery systems. That's all they are. They're different methods of delivery. What are they delivering? Meaning.
Yes.
So then ask yourself, what's the meaning? Don't just make an associative judgment without thinking past your own face. Like you have to ask, what does it mean? Right?
Right.
Granted, there's plenty of metal that when you ask, what does it mean? You're like, you don't want to know.
Right.
Right. But at the same time, there are songs, even by Christian bands, that when you read them, you're like, wow, that was actually kind of terrifying and traumatic to know now, to hear this, to understand, and even in some sense empathize and feel with it, right? Which is weird because you wouldn't think that metal is a place of empathy, but that's basically what we've been describing this entire time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a place of deep vulnerability and the sharing of what's present in that dark place, you know. And it's like, if you're going to help somebody who's in a dark place, who feels like I'm a monster and I don't belong, it's like, well, it's helpful to know that you're a monster, even though if you have yourself under control,
Right.
like you're capable of the same things. You're a monster too. I say this all the time. My garden is full of the same snakes that you got in your garden.
That's right. That's
That
right.
is what it is, man. You know, and to just kind of think of things that way. What does it mean rather than my immediate associative judgment?
Mm-hmm. Right. There's something you said, Josh, that I want to hit on. You talked about it's not whenever you go to the homeless community, you give out pizza. If someone were to see you there from your church, right, without knowing what you're doing, and then assume the worst about you, oh, well, he's going there to blah, 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 right, without coming to you, talking to you about it first, and then say, oh, the appearance of evil. That's not the appearance of evil. I'm sorry. That's your, what's the word? That's your
Projection.
presupposition, projection. Yes. Without seeking understanding, right? Like you said, Josh, we have to ask why or what, right? What do
What does
you
it
mean
mean?
by that? Exactly. What did you mean, Josh, by going to the homeless? What were you seeking to accomplish? Was it your desire to get crack, or was it your desire to give the gospel, right? Receive. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Get or receive and give. And so just to say this, and then we'll wind down. I'll go once around to get some closing thoughts. But just because something looks, but let me rephrase that. Just because you perceive something as evil doesn't necessarily mean it is. It really doesn't. We have got to get here's the thing. Truth, evil, and good are all objective. They come from outside of ourselves. And the only person that gets to define what is good, what is evil, and what is truth is not you or I, it's God. That is the only person that gets to define good and evil. And so until we get on that level and understand it's not about me, it's about him, then we can start judging things righteously instead of presupposing the worst about a Christian brother or sister. Period. End of subject. And so, guys, let's I do want to hit on Mom's one of her comments.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. She said, my problem with metal is not the music. It's the growl. I can't understand what is said. And
It's
so
an
to
acquired
that,
taste.
Mom, to that, I say, listen to music, read the lyrics. We can go on Google. We can find those lyrics. Listen and read them at the same time, and you'll be able to start figuring out what they're saying. Guys, what else you want to add?
You'll never unhear the lyrics after you have read them in
Oh,
tandem with
yeah.
the music.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
100%.
They also make lyric videos now. Like, it's actually pretty common.
Exactly.
Super common. So they're really helpful a lot. So yeah.
Exactly. All right, guys, let's start winding down. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on, for doing this. We're at the 2-hour mark, and I've had a blast. I could keep going all night long, but my wife and little girl, they're probably not too happy with me right now. But yeah. So let's go ahead and start winding down. Chick, where can people find you? What are your last kind of closing words to anybody listening to this that's still wrestling? Christian metal, is there a place for it in Christianity? What's your final words to those people, and where can people find you if they want more of you?
Yeah. There's if I can do some shameless plugging, is that
Absolutely.
cool?
Plug away, bro.
Yeah.
Plug away.
All right. You can find me at Chic Loves You, which is CHIC LOVESYOU, all one word, on Instagram or TikTok. My TikTok has been particularly fun the past couple weeks. The reason I'm here is because Tyler follows me on TikTok and has been seeing some of the content I'm making with people talking about their disdain for Christian metal in my comments, and then me just literally, I just been combating all that with lyrics to my favorite songs. So yeah, man. So you can, once again, Chick Loves You on TikTok or Instagram. And then also you can find, I play drums in the metalcore band. We are called Reverie, Reverie. We put out an EP back in 2018, and we've put some singles out the past couple years, which are leading up to a full length LP that we are sitting on, just waiting to release. So you can find us on. Thanks, man. You can find us on Spotify or iTunes or YouTube. There's other stuff called Reverie. So if you just look up, you can probably just look up our EP. So Reverie, and then look up our EP, The Prodigal, and then some stuff will go with that. We have a music video we released a couple years ago with the legendary Nick Deddy from Wolves at the Gate, who recorded a song with us called Smoke Signals. So you can watch that on YouTube. So yeah, man. So I guess the last thing I kind of want to say is, because we've been talking about it a little bit, especially Josh talking about kind of how the internet has done for the music community. And I kind of just want to point out, like, we've seen a lot of Christian bands and people in Christian bands from the 2000s kind of go into the deconstruction stuff and stuff like that. Like Under Oath, big example. I think with the dawn of Spotify and the more access to very good recording equipment has given us this almost renaissance of Christian metal. Because it used to be you could only really have an effect if you get signed to like Solid State or whatever. And then usually the guys in those bands, for as much as we loved them, the only influence we got were the guys in those bands, and most of the time weren't either discipled correctly or weren't just very deep into their faith that much at all. So that's why I think, even though I refer to the 2000s as a golden era of Christian metal, if you go back to those albums and look at the lyrics, not super deep theologically, right? And I think with how Apple Music and Spotify is now, we're having this renaissance of Christian music where people who like are guys our age are making bands and making their own music now. Guys who have grown in their faith, even some of them being pastors and stuff now. And now we have this really great time where we have people who know their stuff theologically and are good at writing music, who have a way to put music out for us. And you got stuff like bands like Intercessor. If you guys have heard of Intercessor, they literally just last summer made an album about the 5 solas.
Oh wow.
We it's called Sola, right? And we have stuff like that. We have yeah. And it sounds like old For Today and old ABR. That's what the music sounds like, with
right on.
crazy theologically deep lyrics. Talking about stuff like the a hypostatic union and all the solas and stuff like that. Like it's insane. We have another band I like to listen to. They're called Context, and they're just a bunch of reformed dudes who make really great metalcore, and then just have these random little spoken word areas where they just pretty much are preaching sermons in it. And it's so we have this like really great period of time where we have access to music, and you have access to releasing your own music, and people who are very solid in their theology and in their faith are being able to release music. And just seriously, go through Spotify. If you want to get a hold of me and talk to me about this stuff, there's so much good music out there right now, guys. And it's not just your Under Oaths and your ABRs and your Fit for Kings. It's these grassroots guys who know their stuff and are good at writing music. And I'm so in love with the time period we're in with music. Oh my goodness. But yeah, follow me on Spotify if you want, not Spotify, on TikTok if you want to, because I'm going to make a playlist releasing soon. And I talk about lyrics and stuff all the time on there. So thank you for having me, Tyler and Josh. This has been really fun. I hope we can do it again soon, because I can talk about this stuff for hours. Like
Absolutely.
So
Well, it was a pleasure having you, bro. It's nice meeting you, man.
You too.
It was, brother. And send me links to those bands, Chick, and I'll post them in the description for people to check out and go support fellow musicians and bands and things of that sort. So Seamus,
For sure.
Let's go ahead and wind down, brother. Plug away. Feel free to plug. And what are your closing words to anybody listening on this subject?
Man, so I guess a quick plug. You know where we're at, Altarnate Media. I've changed mine to Alternate Metalhead, but Alternate is spelled with 3 A's. So it's like altar of the Lord, Altarnate Media. If you search that, you'll find Alternate Media Brad and Alternate Media Seamus. You'll find us on TikTok, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. You'll find us anywhere there's a social media. When it comes to the Christian metal world, I think, we've said a lot of things here. The biggest takeaway I think that anyone should take from the whole thing, if you've stayed to the end here, is be fearless in this. You're not doing anything wrong. And just, this is an expression of yourself, and this is a form of worship. And you should never be afraid of doing the right thing. You'll never do any wrong by doing right. And there's nothing wrong with worshiping God in a metal context. And so live that truth and be fearless with it. Don't be embarrassed by it.
Amen. Brad, what you got for us, brother?
Yep. Same thing. Seamus pretty much described exactly where to find both of us. I can only echo what Seamus said in being fearless. The only thing I could really add to it is maybe pick up an instrument if I feel like all of us here being musicians, we have a perspective on this that a lot of people who don't play music really can't have, right? We're connected to music intrinsically in a different way that just listeners can't relate to, because this is music that actually flows from us, right? And I think that, and this goes for any genre of music, but naturally for us, metal especially, like, learn to play something, anything. It's easy. It really is easy. It's as complex as metal sounds. It's not as hard as it sounds.
Right.
Well, in some cases, and it will open up avenues to connecting to this genre in a way that you really just couldn't imagine. You'll worship in a whole new way.
Right. Right. And I agree. Definitely don't try any like Dream Theater just starting out. So
no.
very technical, very, very mathematical.
No math metal.
Right. Exactly.
So don't start trying to play animals as leaders.
Yeah, none of that. No music written on an abacus.
No.
But no, I agree 100% with Brad. Even if your forte is not metal, pick up an instrument and learn to play what you like. You will get a new appreciation for music doing it yourself, and you will also, like Brad said, find a new way, a new perspective. As we say on CSG all the time, perspective is everything, right? You will find that new perspective, and I promise you will worship God in a way you never have before. Just kind of closing with me, and then I'll leave the last words to my brother, my co-host, Josh Davidson. So I want to plug our new podcast, actually. So David Russell from Proselytize or Apostatize and myself are starting a new podcast, Faith Unaltered, and you can see that logo right there. It's kind of small, but yeah, we've got the so David's David's YouTube channel, Proselytize or Apostatize, we've actually changed the name to Faith Unaltered now, so we've got the ball rolling there. And I've changed the Complete Sinner's Guide TikTok to Faith Unaltered. And so we're going to be kicking off we're hoping that our launch date is going to be May the 2nd. So we have got a surprise. Yeah, David's going to kill me, but I cannot hold this in anymore, especially since Brad and Seamus are here with us. So we've got a debate lined up on May the 2nd, if Lord willing, with David Wilbur and Rob Solberg. They are debating the Sabbath. And so that is going to be so sick. For those who don't know David, he's from 119 Ministries, an amazing apologist. I love just talking to David about these types of things, and just super cool dude. And we've had Rob Solberg on before. R.L. Solberg is the author of the book Torahism. He has a couple other books, one out, and I think one is in the works. And I'll post a link to all this stuff in the description. But yeah, we've got some really exciting things coming up. We've also got, and I won't give this away, so David, if you're watching, I won't give everything away. But we've got 2 interviews with 2 really well-known scholars coming up in the works. So we're excited about that. We're going to have a launch event. We're hoping to launch this throughout the weekend. So April the 30th, May the 1st, and May the 2nd. So that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then following up on a Monday to close out everything with that debate. I think it's going to be an amazing time. It's going to be super fun. If you haven't subscribed to the Faith Unaltered YouTube channel or TikTok, please do that. We love y'all. We're completely listener dependent. And so we rely on God, and we rely on you, the listener, to get us out there, man. Talk about us, make us known, share our video, share our content. We're dependent on you, like all of us. I mean, all of us, I think, are listener dependent. And so support us. If you disagree with some of the stuff, that is totally fine. Brad and Seamus, me and David had a debate on the deity of Christ recently. And so we can disagree, like David said on that episode. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And I hope that we brought that to you tonight. CSG is really known for one thing, and that's the love that we show to our guests and our listeners. And I'm very, very proud of that CSG has kind of taken that name on itself. And so that's kind of what's going on with me and David in the works. And CSG is not going away at all. If he will, Josh will be taking over that. We're going to have a grace period, a kind of a probationary period where we'll be uploading CSG content and Faith Unaltered content, and then we'll see what the future holds for that. But CSG is definitely not going away anytime soon, and so I'm thankful for that. But my last words to our listeners, about this subject, Christian metal, you know, I really like what was said about this being a tool. It is a form, it is a practice, so to say, to evangelize. I mean, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, right? And how in the world can you hear unless someone is sent? You can't. Period. End of subject. And so for anyone who, like Seamus was talking about, is that fearless, and we've all talked about it tonight, but who is that fearless to actually go out into a dark world and be a light like Jesus commands us to, that takes courage. And I'm proud to call anyone brother who does that, whose faith is in Christ and who does that. Is just, they're number one in my book. Their feet are blessed. The Bible says, blessed are the feet of those who bring good news. And you know what how you proclaim the good news is not important. What's important is that you are proclaiming the gospel. Matthew 28:19 tells us, go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and teach them everything that I have commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always till the end of the age. And that's what we're doing. That's what we are trying to do. That's what people like Maddie Montgomery from For Today, you know, and all the bands and all the people that we've talked about, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the gospel into a broken world. And for that, I give them all the props in the world. So, Josh, what do you got for us, brother? Last words.
Oh, what I have is a lot of gratitude in my heart right now for everybody on this screen, and I'm just so pleased about how this went. I couldn't have been happier with the fact that all of us are musicians, that we've all thought about this more than once, that we're not just trying to prove a point or be stubborn-headed, that this really has been an impactful part of each of our testimony. And I really love the fact that, oh, everybody's giving a unanimous head nod right now. That was really cool.
Nice.
The way that everything kind of hangs together in the air when you look at it is, as you know, you zoom out. It's not just my idea, right? Like, what else has happened here? What like you said, what's the fruit of it, right? What's the fruit of the thing? I pray that the fruit of this conversation wouldn't just be more contention and bad attitudes on the internet, but that this would be something that people can use as a resource to say, no, like, really, there's something thoughtful about this. There's something real about the kind of unity that can be felt. You know, I don't want to be too dramatic, but Seamus, you said you're in the military. Did you ever serve overseas?
Japan, but that doesn't count.
Okay. Well, I have a friend who served in Afghanistan and was there for quite some time and was in plenty of combat situations. And it's not exactly a fun place to be, but there's a deep level of vulnerability and camaraderie that comes out of that environment because of the shared need and the shared allegiance. And there's something very special about the way that can all work out for people who aren't in, let's say, you know, like a functional space in their life. You know, there are a lot of people whose lives feel a lot like a war zone. And there's a beautiful thing about common allegiance and having that comrade to be able to say, like, you know, we're looking in the same direction. And I know that if something happened, you have my back. You know, and we all agreed. We all had the same exact story that, like, we've met people from this community. It seems like it's tied around music. It's not the music. It really isn't. It's the unifying spirit under which the whole thing operates.
Right.
And I think that if anybody gets anything from this talk is that the unity in Christ doesn't have to look like a 3-piece suit on Sunday. And I'm just blessed by all of you guys. I really am so grateful right now. I don't really have much else to say. I'm very grateful. And this was an awesome episode.
Yes, it was. Gentlemen, DJENT.
Yes!
Gentlemen.
Yes!
Gentlemen, thank you again so much. I can't emphasize, you know, I'm right there with Josh. I'm so grateful for how this went, and we've got to do it again. I mean, Chick, I'd love to have you back. Brad and Seamus, you know, we're going to be doing more episodes in the future, so I cannot wait to do that. Penelope, love y'all. Love you, Mama. And
Bye,
we will
Mom.
see you next time on CSG. Until then, stay like Christ, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. God bless, and stay like Christ.